Surprise spoiler cast out of nowhere. I'm just gonna hang out with the scrolling background on this one. Just gonna do a little podcast, basically. I don't know. Just do this whenever I feel like, I guess, because no one can stop me. But I just finished watching the series. I guess either series finale or series premiere or New Year's. It's the New Year's special. I'm never sure what to call these exactly. It's also ranked as a Christmas special, which makes it even more confusing. But anyway, on December 31st, 2020, the Doctor Who episode Revolution of the Daleks aired. And I just watched it today on January 2nd, and I'm just kind of sitting here thinking about it and kind of talking to myself. So I might as well just record that for the audience and all that. Probably because I just need an outlet, because one, it's 2020 and all that, and I'm just cooped up. But also, I don't know a single person in my normal life that gives a fuck about Doctor Who, so I have no one to talk to about this stuff when I want to go on little rants. So all I can do is, the best I can do is a Twitter thread, or this, I guess. I don't know, maybe I'll do future Doctor Who spoiler casts sometimes, when I don't know, it just depends on if I feel like talking about something, I guess. Bonus podcast and all that, I guess. Here we are. Hello. This is very organized, by the way, as it always is. So I didn't like it. I didn't like it. So Doctor Who is in some ways kind of one of my favorite shows, and I just want it to be good, and I just want to love it again, but sometimes it just can't get to where I want it to be in the past. And honestly, so far the Chris Chibnall run has been disappointing. And this has just kind of been the continuation of that, because that's been the three showrunners so far were Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat, and now Chris Chibnall. And there's a lot to say about all those people. Like, Russell T Davies had his own weird quirks and annoyances and whatnot with like the Bad Wolf stuff and the insistence on like just like setting something up over the course of the season, but by setting it up, it was mostly just annoyingly referencing the idea that something's going to happen later and then having it show up. And there's like some other stuff there, but like some good character drama and some good, like, I really got attached to the show during that run, and it was a good time. And Stephen Moffat, who made some of the best episodes of the Russell T Davies show, segment of the show, became the new showrunner. And it's like, okay, that makes sense, because he made like some of the really, really cool stuff and like some of the best episodes we've ever seen. So like he was like beloved amongst the fandom at that point, I would think. I don't know how the fuck the fandom thinks. I'm not plugged into the discourse. But then there's some real big storytelling flaws were getting revealed over time, over the course of his run, and he kind of outstayed his welcome while simultaneously ruining Sherlock, which he did much more dirty than Doctor Who, but both of them are getting pretty rough in certain ways. But like kind of finished strong, like that final season with Bill. Like I had a good time, and I really wish that we got more of Bill, because that was only one quick season and she was a great companion character. But now Chris Chibnall's here, and you had to like check notes of previous episodes to figure out which episodes Chris Chibnall worked on previously. And then you look at them and you're like, oh, I don't know if I liked any of these episodes. He's going to run the show now. So that was a worrying start, but I kind of dug the aesthetic. We get 3 companions this time, and we have our first female Doctor, and Jodie Whittaker is a joy, and I like watching her act and all that, and oh my god, the cinematography. There are so many episodes that are just beautiful, like that one where they're at the fjords, and there's just so many great camera angles, and like the visuals are great, and I'm loving that aspect of it in a lot of ways. And I like the big group because I like to have like a decent number of cast members to bounce between, and so I can dig the fact that there's this many people and they're all interacting. And it also kind of takes me back to like this Miss Frizzle sort of situation, like the Magic School Bus, where you have this female leading power figure that's taking on a group of people that are fish out of water situations, but they're not children, but in some ways they are. Compared to like the Doctor, when they're taken into time travel and space travel and all that stuff like that, can feel like that. And individually, I like each of the 3 characters for different reasons, and they have a good dynamic and good lines, and that there's room to grow there. The problem I've had with the Chris Chibnall run is that there has not been enough of those characters. So they immediately introduce a large cast of 3 companions and a new doctor, and I'm just waiting for big character moments that really teach us about who these people are. And every now and then you get some of that, but not nearly enough. Like, I'm not nearly as attached to these characters as I feel like I should be after years. Like Bill left such a bigger impact on only 1 season than these people have collectively in some cases, and it's just kind of rough. Although the ending of this episode challenges that, because it did get reactions out of me, and it might just because these characters have been living in my head for like 2 or 3 years now, and maybe that's just does the work on its own to some extent. But there's been an overall issue where a lot of episodes are just so overstuffed with exposition and too many characters, and oftentimes we go to a place and then we meet like 5 to 8 new characters that all live in that place, while also bringing in our ensemble of 4 main characters that all come from episode to episode. And then just all of those characters, like, there's so much setup of all those characters who are then all going to start probably dying and whatnot, and then you have to set up the problem and the solution of the episode, and it all has to happen over the course of only an hour. And the episodes have been so dense that I feel like you're just being delivered plot points one by one as fast as possible, and you kind of just are getting dragged along for the ride, and like oftentimes don't get to like feel the show correctly. And and because the stuff doesn't have enough time to breathe, not only are the episodes often very, very rushed, and the stories unsatisfying in their execution, but like over the course of the show, the damage being done is that the characters just like don't have enough going on. And this has been an issue in a number of situations throughout the show too, like just weird moments. Like didn't we have Clara for like an entire season or 2, and then out of nowhere Clara was a teacher, and they'd never mentioned it before, or that just wasn't an established part of her character really, but then it was like every episode was practically about how she's a teacher now, but she was the whole time maybe. And there's been some mishandled sort of character moments here and there, and I'm not going to sit here and like research every single little thought I have because it's a very long show, but things have been mishandled in the past, but it can go really well. And these characters, I want more from them. And since we're closing the book on some of them, this is a spoiler cast, by the way, in case you missed the title somehow. So spoilers. This is, I mean, that's what TV reviews are. TV reviews are just spoiler casts. Nobody is like, I'm going to read the reviews before I choose to watch this specific episode of a show. It's like, what? You're either watching the show or you're not watching the show. But yeah. They were closing the book on some of these characters, and I'm like, oh, that's the end of their opportunities. Damn. To some extent, Graham has had some of the best dialogue of the entire show for the last 2 seasons. And I almost wonder if it's like, is that because that's the person that like the directors and writers and whatnot are just most comfortable writing for? Because like they actually have some good chops here and there for like some good comedy and some good little observations and moments, but they seem to maybe give a lot of them to the most familiar character, which is the white guy. And I kind of wonder if that's the case, because like he sometimes has the best writing out of the whole show, maybe even every episode actually, which is just, I do wonder if that's how that works sometimes. It's like you kind of just funnel them to the most comfortable character when you're trying to do these kinds of things, or maybe that was just the character that they had the best, just knew had a best work with, and so on. But anyway, let's actually talk about the plot of the episode, I guess, which is a lot. So the doctor was imprisoned, and so the doctor gets broken out of prison by Captain Jack from the original season of the not original show, the new show, I almost said season 9, Doctor 9, season 1, back in the day. I liked Jack a lot back then, and so I kind of like the idea of him coming back seems neat, but I kind of hated it. And I'm trying to figure out why, and to some extent it's like his acting was distracting every second of the show, and I don't know how to put it. I'm not like an acting expert, so I don't know when something's going wrong. I can just feel something's going wrong, but I don't necessarily know what is going wrong. But like, it felt weirdly like there was a children's show character in the middle of this show, which I know it's like it is a family show, but I mean like it was like an extra from like Blue's Clues or something wandered onto the set of this like of a completely different show, you know, Doctor Who, and was like still delivering lines like that. He said every line weird, and it sounded like every single line was supposed to be like a one-off like zinger that the audience all reacts to. Like he was practically pausing to react. Like it was like this, it was like a laugh track sitcom character was on the show, and he said everything kind of the same flat way, and each line, like it was so weirdly hokey and cheesy, but like not in like a knowing way. It was like it just looked like he was acting wrong. And so there's a lot of scenes where he's across from Jodie Whittaker, and you can read all these different emotions and all these different things going through her head because she's good at this. And across from her is Jack, and he's just like shouting his next line as if he's helping her practice the scene. Like she's there getting in character, and he's like just there to do the line reads so that she can continue doing the scene. It was so strange. And I don't know, like I didn't watch Torchwood, so I don't, which is where he got the most screen time, I think, and so I don't know how he was on there. And I haven't really revisited Doctor 9 and 10 for a while, so like I don't know if he always was like this, or if he's like kind of changed in age and gotten out of practice or not. Or maybe because that was Russell T Davies, I don't think he was ever in a Stephen Moffat episode. I think he was only in the first 4 seasons, probably only the first 2 seasons with Rose even. It might have just been a hokier, sillier, cheesier show. Like there was a fart alien. Like I remember the Roxicoricofallatorius, is that what it was? There was fart aliens. Like it was a very different tone. In fact, it was very noticeable, like how much like the entire filming of the show changed between seasons 4 and 5, where the moment it switched over to Stephen Moffat, some behind the scenes stuff clearly changed because the entire show looked different. Its color temperature went from warm to cold, I think, and like it suddenly looked like a really high detail, well framed show as opposed to like a cheaply filmed but fun, silly, cheesy sci-fi show. And so like maybe it's because all of Doctor Who changed in its presentation, and then they just brought back a character from the beginning of the show and had him behave the same way, and maybe he just felt alien and dissonant and confusing. But yeah, I wanted Jack to go away, which is not how I expected to feel throughout that. But that's not the biggest issue with this episode. We'll get to that. Meanwhile, Graham, Yaz, and Ryan are sad and concerned because it's been 10 months and they haven't seen the doctor, and they don't know what's going on because, as often goes to the case, in order to kind of manufacture some drama, but just, I say manufacture, but it doesn't really bother me, because the drama is good. When Jack breaks the doctor out, they time travel badly, which is a well-established part of the show. It just happens all the time, is the doctor arrives at the wrong year or month or whatever. So she wanted to arrive like immediately-ish so that they didn't have to worry about her. But she arrived 10 months after her disappearance. So they had to deal with the idea of maybe she is dead for 10 months. And there's a lot of emotional moving on and so on. It makes the changes that are about to happen feel abrupt with closing the door on some of these characters. But that's because time travel feels abrupt when you experience it from the time traveler's perspective. But like, yeah, these characters changed and processed stuff and in some ways grieved her and moved on over the course of those 10 months. So they're not necessarily going to be game for just popping back into sticking around forever. But Yaz was obsessed. She did not move on, and she was trying to figure out how to save the doctor, and she didn't make any progress because she most likely couldn't unless they wanted to make her some sort of like super being companion, which they've done a few times, where someone is just way too competent and somehow could figure out this insane time travel stuff without any help. Some characters have done some insane things in the show, but not this time. And so yeah, they're in a rough place, but in the background, the worst part of this episode is happening, which I don't know why I took this long to set this up, but this is what pissed me off and probably lit the fire under my ass and got me to want to sit here and talk about this. Pissed me off is pissed me off is a strong way to put it, but I'm just like, Doctor Who, please, we've been through this. Stop this. Please stop this. The Daleks are back. Stop that. So the show the show starts off feeling very 2020. There's no plague, so there's not a coronavirus analog in this episode, but they have protester suppression as a plot point. There's the Donald Trump stand-in character from a few seasons ago, or one season, I think it was 2 seasons ago, with the spider episode comes back, and that in its own was like, not this guy, not this guy, because I don't like that episode because it's confusing on a moral level and a bunch of other things, because it's the episode where where the doctor's like, no, don't kill the spiders, that's evil. Instead, let them slowly suffocate and die in pain. And it's like, this is a confusing moral hair to split right now, Jody. Like, I don't know if this is the hill to die on, because like the show frames this the capitalist man character as being a villain for shooting a spider with a gun, but they're like it's a giant like 30-foot spider, and it dies of the gun, but then they lock all the other like he's bad for doing that, but then their humane thing was to lock all the other spiders in a room so they can't get to everybody, but they're all dying because they're growing so large that they're going to suffocate, because that's how spiders work, more or less. I think that's more or less correct, is like the idea that like they breathe through their skin essentially, and like there's like a surface area to mass problem where if they get too big, then there's too much mass for their surface area and they can't like breathe enough to like maintain their body and survive. I don't know, it reminds me vaguely of like the idea that like dinosaurs weren't warm-blooded, but they were cold-blooded, but they were kind of de facto warm-blooded because they were so large that their body just kind of would contain too much heat that couldn't escape through their skin, because the larger they got, they had too much mass compared to the skin, and so there was a the inefficiency of the heat escape would lead to them running warmer despite not having the sort of like warm-blooded like body setup, or however that works. I'm not an expert here. And that's why a lot of dinosaurs had like giant fins, because those were a way of running their blood through that big fin, and where it's just like a narrow piece of skin and their blood goes through that, and then that cools it off, and that cools their whole body off. Like that's why you see that one low to the ground dinosaur that has like a giant vertical fin coming out of its back, like, and that's why wings ultimately evolved, maybe, if I'm getting this stuff right. And there's like an upper limit on how big dinosaurs can get because they would boil alive eventually, and that's horrifying. So like the spiders are having that problem where they're hitting their upper mass limit. This is why Ant-Man can't work, I guess. And so like they're dying. They're gonna die horribly because their very existence dooms them to dying in a bad way. But like the episode weirdly grandstands on this moral idea that shooting one is bad, but locking them all in a room to suffocate to death is good. And that's, I prefer not to think about that episode. So going back to that episode and bringing that character back to make me think about that episode and calling him the spider guy as a reminder just reminds me of another bad episode of Doctor Who that I try not to think about. I definitely, when I revisit the show, I definitely like have specific episodes that I love to go back to, and you definitely like filter out certain ones a bit because it's a grab bag. This whole show's a grab bag, and like that's kind of the part of the fun. Like it's like Black Mirror, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Next Generation, and all that. Like there's obviously there can be through lines of storytelling, although not in Black Mirror usually. But like it often works as an anthology where a specific episode explores a specific idea. So you could just go, like, once people are familiar with Data in Next Generation, you can just fire up the episode about It's called A Measure of a Man, I think, where they interrogate, like, is Data a person? Does he have should he have rights? How does this work? Is artificial intelligence to be on the same legal level as human and all that? Like, that's a great episode, and you can just jump to that one instead of watching every single episode of every single season up to that point and so on. Like, that's the power of these shows sometimes, is that the ideas are often the best part. And yeah, I like the character growth and I like the character stuff, and that's what keeps me watching episode to episode, and it helps me get through the bad episodes. But the ideas are what's great. So among other things, stuff like the spider stuff, I'm just like, this is not a particularly interesting idea. And so that's another reason for me to not particularly want to revisit that one. And the bummer is that I don't have a lot of standout episodes of the last few seasons, and that's kind of the bummer here, is like there's not really a ton of like heaven sent, hell bent episodes, or Green Waterfall, I think it was called. No, the girl who waited, the red something, Green Waterfall, something like that. Asylum of the Daleks, or Dalek, or a lot of episodes. Blink. Like there's a lot of episodes you can just visit individually, and they often have really cool ideas. And there's a lot of range of what you can do with Doctor Who. Like sometimes it's a horror show, sometimes it's pure sci-fi, and like either way, like if a really good horror concept will make me revisit an episode, and a really good sci-fi concept will have me revisit an episode, or if it's just an amazing thing about a particular character or so on. Like there's really neat stuff. And what I hate about this episode is they set up an interesting idea and they go nowhere with it. So it's very 2020 in that they're doing riot suppression / protest suppression via police robots. And so it's like, oh my God, this might get heavy for a 2020 New Year's special. I guess 2021 New Year's special. How do you count these? End of 2020 New Year's special, at least. Kind of heavy to have the government is going to suppress protests via high-tech police drones that the protesters can't reasonably resist. And like that's how dystopias start. That's how a lot of the worst settings we've seen in things get started, is when the government just gets better and better at suppressing its people and so on. It's like, okay, where's this episode this is going to be interesting. Like maybe this episode has a finger on the pulse a little bit on 2020 a little bit. Although Jodie Whittaker does quote Harry Potter in order to cope with being in jail. But yeah, but it's like, okay, the Daleks are the police, and the Doctor is a criminal. Like, okay, this is an interesting thing to start off. And then Jodie Whittaker, yeah, she quotes the first line of the first chapter of Harry Potter, because she was about to like read herself a bedtime story. And then I'm like, okay, maybe they don't have the finger on the pulse of 2020, because they're going to J.K. Rowling as a comforting place right now. Maybe there might be a bit of dissonance here. Although, given the insular nature of British television and how it's a bunch of family members and a lot of nepotism and all that, maybe they're not particularly understanding of how people aren't psyched right now about fellow British writer J.K. Rowling. Maybe they probably feel closer to her than the people that aren't very happy about that right now. But this is not the topic to go on about. But it was definitely a thing that stood out to me. I'm like, oh, okay, that is a choice to quote Harry Potter this year. The problem here is they go nowhere with this. They go nowhere with this, and I'm mad at them. So, Doctor Who, any sci-fi really, like, it's science fiction because it's about science fiction. It's kind of a self-recursive definition, but it's about expressing this particular guy, this particular idea, and like coming up with new things to explore. And those things you're exploring are often themselves holding up a mirror to society and how we treat each other, or what we value, or where technology could take us in the future. Or in many cases, you're using a vision of the future or an alien setting to just explore what life is right now, but in a way that abstracts it and lets people look at it in a more objective way in many cases. Like, you go back to, like, what was it? I have it somewhere around here. I have Micro Megas by Voltaire, and it's like, in some ways, might be the first ever sci-fi written ever. Like it's really old at this point. I don't know. That's a really loose definition to go by, so let's not stick to that hard. But it's definitely much older than basically any other sci-fi people engage with reasonably, and it deals with these kinds of concepts. And even in his thing, it's just very succinctly put that by expressing stories in this abstract fantasy setting, you can interrogate the ideas of modern society in a way that abstracts it a bit, so people can look at it more objectively and more directly without having to deal with like this, without like bringing in their existing baggage. That's kind of the goal of a lot of sci-fi in many cases. There's even an aspect of this with like anthropomorphized characters. Like you look at Zootopia being a bunch of animal people. It's like, oh, this is a way that we can try to discuss bigotry and prejudices in a movie, but without it being about specific racial groups of the existing world, even though it is about them, but not having them be the characters. Because if you sort of give a few layers of removal, then people can deal with the idea in the abstract a little bit without dealing with the existing baggage, because people have like a gut reaction to specific groups or specific things because they engage with it on a daily basis, and they have like defenses against those things. Like people have been arguing about stuff forever, and they're always arguing about stuff, and whenever something's vaguely political or vaguely important to normal daily life, people are so many layers deep in the existing argument that they have built-in reactions to certain things the moment you show them certain familiar things. And so to get past those familiarities, if you can just like blur stuff a little bit, you can suddenly maybe reach people with particular ideas. And that's the thing, is like people are always like, I hate when people are like, stop trying to have an agenda or a message or whatever. It's like, what the fuck do you think sci-fi is? Like it always has the message is the point. Like expressing an idea is the point. It's like cyberpunk. Like cyberpunk has a built-in message to its setting, and there's a goal in all of that. And just being like, woo, cool lasers is like not getting cyberpunk, and criticizing cyberpunk for having a political message is like criticizing a political rally for having political messages at some point. Like at some point, and also like as a concept, like stories exist to express ideas and explore them, and in many cases are morality tales and a word of warning and caution or so on. Like that's why we tell stories in many cases. It's not all stories pretty much always have baggage, and almost all art is political and so on. And so this is a big hole to go down. But getting the message muddled or just not really having much of a message is exactly why specific parts of sci-fi can fall so flat and be so disappointing. And this episode was that, because so they keep showing flashbacks or a sequence of scenes with like the capitalist man and the future prime minister of England or the UK or whatever. Sorry. And like she's rising through the political layers and getting support, and he's doing machinations in the background, and it's like, oh, and it all culminates in like the idea that they're gonna have like these police drones, and it's like, oh, this is gonna get a little dark, but I want to see where this goes, because this is, this is definitely an idea, and like this is good setup for something that's gonna go somewhere, right? And then they just don't. they just don't do anything with it, because then it becomes all about like the doctor gets back and reunites with Yaz and Ryan and Graham, and Jack is there, and then it just becomes about them finding out, oh my god, Daleks are on this planet, we better deal with the Daleks. And then it just becomes about dealing with the Daleks in a largely unapplicable storyline. Like it doesn't really mean anything or go anywhere. It's just the Dalek episode we've seen over and over again but again. And so I guess that's what kind of got me to want to just sit here and talk about this, is just like the frustration of like not getting the episode I was promised by the beginning of the episode. Like the beginning of the episode sets up a concept, and it's like, oh wow, I wonder how this is going to be implemented into society, what the wider ramifications might be for culture and the world, and like how, like what does how's the government going to behave if literally like protests aren't a thing anymore, and things become increasingly controlled, and nobody has the power to resist anymore. Like obviously it is somewhat well treaded ground, in that it is just things that have been explored a lot as an idea, but not exploring it at all is certainly a choice. The kind of talking in circles a little bit here, but as far as I can remember, basically the prime minister, the newly elected prime minister, just kind of goes on about how like this is the era of security, and I don't think anyone really has an issue with it, and there's no protest against the idea of like what this means for their freedoms and what's going to happen to them. And this is also like a weird alternate world where the virus doesn't seem to exist, and it's just apparently those robots are just going to be implemented into society. And then in the background they're finding like, oh, to see, they're just empty drones. That's fine. It's not, these aren't Daleks, whatever those are, because I don't know what Daleks are. These are just police drones that somebody reverse engineered from a Dalek shell, but I don't personally know that because I'm the guy overseeing this. But then like in the background, somebody is secretly cloning Daleks because they found like some spare DNA lying around. And now so Daleks are actually back. And like, oh shit, now the Daleks are here and they're going to shoot everybody and skeletonize them. And this is the least interesting kind of episode ever to me. I hate Dalek episodes where it's just like the Daleks are here and they're going to like skeleton a bunch of people. Because like I know what's going to happen. The Doctor is going to like magically win. Basically, like that's what usually amounts to with the Dalek episodes, is like the Doctor just wins each time. And like there's a certain aspect of the whole show kind of being like that, like the Doctor just kind of creating a magic solution to problems. It's why those, and usually that's why those particular episodes fall really flat in many cases, where like some of my favorite episodes are stuff like Midnight, where in many cases where you get to see the Doctor be kind of powerless to actually stop the problem. And sometimes, and like the solution comes from within the mechanics of the episode. So like you have a setting and here's the rules and here's the things that are happening right now. And then the solution to the problem, be it a magic everybody lives perfect solution or a grim, like, I guess we got out of that, but that's fucked up solution, comes from within whatever was introduced. And so it feels like a coherent story and it feels emotionally satisfying, even if it was a bad thing that happened. Because like in Midnight's case, it was the person sacrificing themselves, and it wasn't even the Doctor who really made the choice. And it was like this big, and you have that grim line of like, did anyone even know her name? It's like a distressing outcome. Like that's one of my favorite episodes ever. Whereas episodes where the Doctor just like, I don't know, I do a time vortex and magic trap thing and problem gone, is just infuriating to me. And what I don't like about the Dalek as a concept is that almost every episode I can remember, and it's hard to remember them because Dalek episodes are very unmemorable. It's like the Doctor just kind of does a magic vortex that fixes the problem at some point, and you're like, oh, okay, what was the point of this episode? It's like, okay, maybe the Daleks were removed via a Deus Ex Wesley saves the ship situation, but at least we had a good concept that was explored during the episode, right? No? Fuck. Why did we watch this? I'm so sick of Dalek coming back every season or so and just wasting an episode. There's some good ones. Asylum of the Dalek with Souffle Girl and all that was interesting, at least, and so I enjoyed that episode. And the original Dalek episode of the new show was a horror episode of this slowly approaching unstoppable force, and you're like, are the Doctor and Rose going to be able to get through this? And like it was like good horror storytelling on that level, and so the first one gets a pass from me, and it was way more interesting because it has character storytelling, and like you learn about stuff about the Doctor, and it's weirdly grim and serious and distressing because you see this rage in the Doctor that you're not ready to see and stuff like that. It served a purpose there. But in this one, it's like, okay, oh damn, the evil corpo bot police Daleks that were maybe just drones. Turns out there's real Daleks. Shit, they're just real Daleks. Man, dang, geez. And so the Doctor's like, well, we're fucked. I know what I'll do. I'll pull out one of my... Oh, this is real serious. I better do this time. Solution. So she calls more Daleks to the planet, and those are like the genetic police Daleks that hate impure Daleks and kill them. So those ones kill the impure Daleks, and it's like I don't like this storytelling. So one of the appealing things about the Doctor is that she is kind of a pacifist. She doesn't carry a gun, and she doesn't carry a weapon. She usually runs from problems, but then finds solutions and ways to deal with them. But like her when it comes to like fighting and conflict, her solution is run for your life, as the lines often go. Like what was like the fucking like first line of the entire show basically, I think, was like, hello, Rose Tyler, I'm the Doctor, run for your life, I think was the actual opening line of the show basically. Like the Doctor saves Rose from like a mannequin monster or something, and then their next step is to run. And like one of the nice things about the Doctor is like he like David Tennant, like he wears like a suit, like a pinstripe suit, I think, and like it's like kind of nice clothes in most of the iterations, but he wore sneakers because dude's gotta run. Like that's built into the character. Is like there are constantly hostile conflicts, and the best way to buy time to think of a solution is to physically run away from it, because you can't fight it, because fighting it is violent and killing and all that. And part of the appeal for the character is that they try to find better solutions than just killing the enemy. Partly because just killing things is just kind of less interesting storytelling, and partly because it's, you know, it's a family show, but also it's just like I like any kind of fiction that kind of questions how much killing we do in all of our media. Like obviously there's still a place in video games for like just shoot all the guys and be a good shooty boy and be good at shooting. Like being good at shooting is fun. I'm not throwing that out the window. But constraining all of video games, for example, to just be about like violence and treating violence and killing as the only verb we can do is a bummer. And it's like, no, there's like adventure games, and there's like other ideas we can explore, and there's like narratives that can be told in a way that don't just involve killing people every single chapter all the time. Like stuff like Disco Elysium and things, and Outer Worlds, and I mean Outer Wilds can be really interesting. And so I just like exploring a wider breadth of what you can do. And so I like the idea of like having an action sci-fi setting, but not necessarily having it constantly be about killing, even though Doctor does have a body count. The Doctor Who, both the character and the show, have a hell of a body count. But the having a character that tries really hard not to go straight to violence and not having that be their default instinct is good shit. Which is why the Daleks suck, because the Daleks are just a murder army. And so in many cases, they just have to get killed in order for the Doctor to win. And so in many cases, the Doctor either becomes a murderer or condones murder or killing or whatever the word you want to use for it. So they have to either kill things themselves or condone somebody else killing things, or create some kind of like elaborate trap that functionally basically kills things, but in a kind of like, I don't necessarily directly pull the trigger sort of way. And it's just like, it strains the morality and the characterization of the protagonist in a way that kind of breaks it. And so I'd like to not think about these episodes, in part because they don't feel coherent with the rest of the show in many cases. And I don't know, I guess we're just kind of going back to the Daleks forever because they're just iconic and no other reason. And that's frustrating for its own reasons. But yeah, the Doctor calls even more racist Daleks in, basically, because the Daleks are horrible racist murder bots, and they bring in the genetic purity police bot Daleks from the time stream, and they're like, we must kill these Daleks because these Daleks are not pure Daleks, so they must be genocided. And it's like, oh, your solution this episode, Jodie, is to genocide them based on their genetic makeup. That's that's the Doctor's solution to the problem. I don't love this one, Jodie. I don't love this one very much, Dr. 13. Can we not do that? And then her solution to the second wave of Daleks, when that goes bad and they don't just leave, because the original idea was that they're going to be like, we got the genetically impure Daleks. We don't care about humans, so we're not going to attack humanity. But and they're supposed to just leave, but that goes wrong. They start hunting the Doctor, so the Doctor like traps them in the spare TARDIS, which is then going to go into like the abyss of the galaxy or whatever, or the void, and then collapse upon itself, which sounds a lot like killing the Daleks with extra steps. Like it's like shooting them with a gun, but with like a few extra steps. And it's like, don't like how this characterizes you, Jodie, the Doctor, and all that. That stuff disappoints me a lot. I kind of wish they would stop bringing back the Doctor. Like, there's kind of this like whole idea that they established that John Hurt, rest in peace, was the secret war doctor that happened between Doctors 8 and 9, and it had to do a bunch of horrible things in order to survive the war with the Daleks, and like that's why none of the other Doctors want to remember or acknowledge him. That's an era of their life, because it's like a great shame upon the Doctors. And there's kind of a redemption arc in the 50th anniversary special built around that thing a little bit, or at least like some level of like coming to terms with the War Doctor and who that was. In fact, that's also when he was introduced. And like, if you're gonna do that struggle about the morality of what they had to do to deal with the Daleks, it kind of kills that to keep reintroducing the Daleks and making the Doctor do horrible things to defeat them again, over and over again. Like, I just like, can we stop this? But also, it's just like, I'm also here to watch, like I said before, like the anthology level thing of like, let's keep introducing new ideas, and I want to see cool new surprises and weird ideas get explored. So whenever a Dalek shows up, it's like, unless they have a really specific story that they want to explore and only the Daleks can help them do it, we're usually just wasting that episode when it could be a cooler idea than that. And that's definitely part of the problem. And that's the thing. God, I did like a tweet thread that I did today. Maybe I wonder if I should read that. Because that being not enough was essentially why I just came here and decided to start ranting about it. But that was basically just what I said a second ago, though. It's just the idea that like first and foremost, this show should be about telling stories and exploring ideas, and as you go forward in time, you build this like this collection of villains that you can draw upon whenever you need to. But the key word here should be when you need to. Like, you can go back to the Cybermen, or the Jodun, or the Ood, or the Weeping Angels, or the Daleks, and so on, and any of the other ones that we've established over the years. You can go back to those when you need to. First and foremost, there should be a story that you want to tell that is something new and special and worth adding to the Doctor Who canon. And that's going to be like a worthwhile episode of television that isn't wasting everybody's time, and that's going to be a great time. And then you're like, you know what would really fit with this? It's like, yeah, the villain should probably be the Cybermen because of this particular theme about the episode. And that, yeah, because like people like to see a familiar thing come back sometimes, but like only if you're exploring a particular idea and you realize that bringing back the familiar thing is going to actually add to that, and you're not just gonna like waste time. Because some of my favorite episodes, like The Girl Who Waited, are a villain that we've never seen before and have never seen since, and I'm fine with that. I don't really want the monsters from my favorite episodes to just come back one day. Like the Weeping Angels continually coming back is mostly just kind of annoying, because they had a really cool introduction, and not only do they keep coming back in confusing ways over time, but their rules seem to keep changing and kind of getting annoying. Like I think at one point they made the Weeping Angels just murder people, and it's like, wait, but I thought they sent people back in time to do the... Wait, what? Now they've murdered somebody and they're talking through their body? Like, that's not on the Weeping Angel, like, move list. That's like a Dalek, like, tentacle possession move. What's going on here? No, I just want weird shit to come up. Like, stop! Who turned out the lights? Or, like, just weird skeleton space suits that are automating around and are replaying the final thoughts of their dying hosts. Like, oh my god, some of these ideas that we've had on Doctor Who and have never come back are so good, and I hope they never come back. Like Silence at the Library. So yeah, I guess that's the premise of this episode, is just expressing my disappointment. Is I just wanted to rant about this a little bit. Is that like they fucking did police suppression bots as an episode of Doctor Who and then just didn't finish the thought. This episode is like a shave and a haircut without the 2 bits. It's just da 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 da. And then they just start playing like, I don't know, like a Green Day song instead of the 2 bits at the end. Like they just fucking forgot they set up a sci-fi premise to explore, and then the Daleks just attack and they skeletonize a bunch of people with their skeleton lasers, and the audience claps because they're like, I know that's the thing I know. And then we just repeat this every year. Do we want this? Like, do you guys, Doctor Who people in the audience that presumably exist here and are watching this? I don't know who chooses to click on these things. Like, are you happy when the Daleks come back? Are you like, yay, the Daleks, my favorite? I love Dalek storylines where they go exterminate and shoot something, and then they skeleton laser, and then Doctor Who like puts them into like a space blender. And then we all don't try to think about the morality of what that means for a minute. And then the credits roll. Because I'm sick of it. I'm super sick of it. It's almost never like a story. It's pretty much just the same episode repeating. And we've done it like, I think almost once a season now. And it's like, dude. The Cybermen are like that, but almost more boring. But they're like slightly less popular. So there's like a higher chance that they're going to be used in a premise where they serve the premise instead of just existing for their own sake. By the way, just as a side note, because this is an episode of Side Notes anyway, I am mad that Missy is gone for multiple reasons. One, there was like a story arc that was happening with Missy and a particular direction that Missy was taking, and I feel like you just kind of like sequence broke that when they suddenly brought back a different master. But also like, I just don't like the new guy. I just don't like the new guy very much. I don't think the new master is interesting or entertaining particularly. And Missy was just a joy. Like Missy was a fantastic, very fun performance of the master. And I liked that a lot. And I don't like the master, generally speaking. Because like when he came back at the end of David Tennant's run, that was like some of the worst episodes of the entire show, really. And so when the master comes back, it's often just not very good. And you could definitely go somewhere with this, because it's like, oh, it's like the Joker. It's like, here's the character that kills, and we're all rooting for this character that doesn't kill. And like that the morality of like the master kind of like poking at the Doctor's morality and challenging them and trying to break them in a killing joke sort of way can be interesting. And sometimes Missy did that, but oftentimes these master storylines just aren't very interesting. But at the very least, we could have kept just an excellent actress that I was just having fun with. Even if I was very annoyed that like Stephen Moffat was so one note a few seasons ago that like he was simultaneously airing 2 separate shows where like the mastermind sort of family member evil villain lady was locked in a special prison with a musical instrument. Because that was like the final episode of Sherlock, was like the the secret evil sister in her weird brain prison playing violin, and the Missy was locked in a weird dungeon with a piano. And I'm like, maybe you shouldn't write many shows at once, because I feel like you're getting spread a little thin, buddy. But anyway, that was the main idea, is just the overwhelming disappointment of the episode as an idea. But it's also the closure of, it's the ending of two characters, Graham and Ryan. And this was probably the best part of the episode. It seemed hokey and like cheesy and manipulative a little bit, and I was like, oh, we're really doing this. But then I actually started crying, so I guess it had, despite having my initial reaction of being like, I don't know about this, it actually kind of went in a solid direction. Part of it was that Ryan was just like, no, I don't know, I think my planet needs me, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, this seems like a weird, abrupt way to get off the show. But there was the whole 10-month thing we didn't see, and so like I said before, like, it's abrupt to experience time travel from the time traveler's perspective instead of the people that are having to wait the long way around. But it's like, yeah, these people had time to think and get closure and process what these vacations essentially are doing to them. And so, like, wanting to get out and experience life the normal way, and also like be there for their planet, as he was putting it, like that, or at least the people in their lives, like that makes a kind of sense. And also, it's good to see people leave the show amicably, because they don't have a good track record. Like, companions go bad. Like, Rose is trapped in a parallel timeline. Donna got all of her memories erased. Martha had to save the world because the doctor and her family and the entire world was all imprisoned, and things went real bad. So she technically didn't get totally taken out in her final episode, but her final episode was a real bad time, at the very least. Clara died, but got paused in a time pause of her death where she's going on adventures with Nobody. What was her name? Was her name Nobody? There was she had like a quirky name. The girl that became immortal. They're going on adventures in their like diner TARDIS, but she's also technically dead, basically, which is not great. Rory and Amy ultimately got taken out by, I believe they got taken out by a weeping angel, right? And so like they ultimately got caught by that in that way, and I think they still get to like live a whole happy life together somewhere, or maybe something like that. But like it's like that, but it's still like they didn't consent to that outcome. And then Bill gets turned into a Cyberman and then kind of dies, but then goes into like the Water Girls lesbian time travel dimension. It made sense in context. When I'm saying those, like, the Doctor Who companions, especially in the new run, I don't know the old ones very well, they tend to like kind of die, but not quite. I don't think any of them have literally just straight up died so far, but they definitely like death adjacented. They definitely almost never get to just like go back to like their apartment and pick up their life again. There was a good line mentioned about how like when Doctor Who companions, they come back changed, if they come back at all. And a lot of them don't come back at all in a certain way. But yeah, they always come back changed. And so ideally, the best outcome as a companion is probably just to have come back changed in that you had like a character arc, not you got brain death of some sort or whatever the fuck, or turned into a non-human entity and have to just kind of find joy in your new existence or whatever the hell it is now. Because that stuff can be rough. Like, you didn't opt into that necessarily. Although I do think that like there's a certain amount of suffering built into the show at times where just so many bad things happen that like you would as a companion, after like a dozen of these adventures, you might be like, maybe I should get off this boat, because I get to see some really cool stuff, but also like some really horrifying stuff keeps happening. And I don't know how most people, if they were real people, how well people would take to that necessarily. If they would just like be like, this is traumatic at some point. I think that was I had a bit of a dissonance happen, I think, with Martha. Yeah, with Martha, where they kept with Rose Tyler, they kept implying that off camera, cool, fun adventures were happening constantly, Applegrass and blah blah blah, and like they and like I think with Amy Pond and a lot of other adventures, like they keep implying that like maybe a dozen adventures have happened between episodes, and there's a lot of great cool stuff happening, and that justifies why they're so into this, to help offset the how things are always going bad during the episodes we see, because that's where there's a conflict and a story to tell, as opposed to just like a fun adventure where they just chill. Although in stuff like Midnight, like Donna gets to just hang out in a spa and have a great time while the Doctor is having a Doctor Who episode and she's off camera. So like that stuff like that. But I think Martha season, they weirdly kept having every episode bleed directly into the next episode, where there was no chance for like time to pass in between logically. And so I was like, wow, you're just getting put through a lot, especially since if there's an African, if you have a black character in these shows, they almost always, no, they actually, I think they just do always, if there's a black companion, because there's been 3 now, they always get taken back to a time in the past where it was much worse to be black, and then they have to deal with that, and they always explore that idea, which makes sense because it's a children's show about time travel, and like that was the original premise, was teaching about history, like that's why the show existed originally. But it's also like, but when you think about those characters, you're like, I depending on how that goes, you're like, I don't know if I would want to keep going on these adventures after something like that happens. Like, I think the most recent version with Rosa Parks, Ryan didn't have the worst time necessarily, and maybe even a couple cathartic, like, yeah, fuck you history moments, but I don't remember the episode super well right now. But like Martha, I think, gets trapped in a 2-episode story arc where the Doctor loses his memory. Not Martha, Martha. Martha gets stuck in the past in like a 2-episode story arc where the Doctor loses his memory, and she just has to maintain faith that there's a way out of this and she'll be able to get home one day. So she has to deal with the idea of like maybe, I think it was like weeks or months or years of like living in this society where she is mistreated. And it's like that, at some point I was like, why are you still going on these adventures? Why aren't you opting out the way that so many of these people do? But I guess even when she quit after the first season, she then did Torchwood, I guess, which I haven't watched, but I guess she just wanted to keep going down this path, even though it goes so badly for her. Although I think Torchwood isn't about time travel, it's about Doctor Who style villains coming to Earth when the Doctor's not there, and so on. I haven't watched Torchwood, I'm sorry. I heard there's like a woman Cyberman that like people hated because it was like the Borg Queen from Next Generation, where it's just like, why are you ruining Cybermen the same way that the Borg were ruined by having a weird like alien queen that like messes it all up or something? I don't know. And now I'm just talking about things I haven't watched, so that's just a bad idea. So it was nice seeing Graham and Ryan leave the show without getting turned into space dust or whatever the fuck, or getting murdered. It felt a little abrupt at the moment, but it makes sense overall. And it's like I had like a weird reaction of like, oh, is this what's happening? And it might have been because the episode was so iffy up to that point that I was like kind of predisposed to be like, and now they're gonna fuck this up. But they kind of, like, as the scene kept going, it kind of kept growing on me until it was like had like an emotional crescendo, and it was like effective despite the episode essentially. And really Graham sold it, because like Ryan gave a speech about why he was leaving, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's justification, that makes sense. But even in the background, I'm like, are they cynically just removing Ryan to replace him with a different character? Are we gonna get a new companion that just replaces Ryan, and that's why Ryan's going? And like, that's a little iffy, especially since Ryan was the first one of these companions we met, so he's kind of like the main character of these 3. So removing him feels weird a little bit. And like, what is Graham just gonna keep? Like, I thought Graham was just gonna keep going on adventures with them without Ryan, and like, despite the obvious tone problems that would introduce. But then Graham also is, you have like his little struggle, and and his realization that he's not going to go on these adventures anymore because he doesn't want to miss out on his family, and he doesn't want to come back changed or miss this or so on. And so he's going to go off and he's going to go with Ryan back to the world because that's what he values more than anything. And it rings emotionally true, and it's like well done. And Graham's actor usually does a good job with these little nuanced performances, and he's like, I want to see him more as part of the struggle, because I'm like, no, don't leave, because I actually like that guy a lot. And they go right back to like the full circle moment of Ryan trying to ride the bike because he has the coordination development disorder of some sort. There was like a term for it that I've forgotten a bit over time. And it was good to have a nod back to that, because that was a detail that like they kept hitting early on, and then they kind of like didn't bring it up very much necessarily. So yes, people are more than their disabilities, and so it's kind of nice to just not constantly bring it up. But at the same time, I kind of suspected that the writers just forgot about it. But it is kind of like a slightly nuanced sort of situation where it wouldn't come up constantly necessarily. So it's just kind of like a nod of representation here and there, just have some fun with it, and just bring in different people and let different people feel seen, but not have it be a massively distracting thing. It's just every now and then you're like, hang on a minute, there's a ladder, this is going to be a problem, and just kind of have that as a character trait. It's obviously not like a visible thing that you would constantly be reminded of, and so it's specifically something that only comes up when he has to do really specific actions, essentially. And I don't know how true to life that was, or how people feel about its representation. That, like, I don't know if there's people in the audience that know more about this stuff, and they might have a perspective about what it was like to see a character in that way, and where, like, if they thought that the character was like well represented, or if they just forgot about it or something. But it's always kind of neat to show that kind of stuff. Like, it's, if nothing else, it's like an awareness moment where I'm like, oh, I think I just learned something, because I don't even think I even really knew that this was like, maybe like intellectually on some level I had like this idea that this was a possibility or in the range of things that people have, but I didn't really have a specific understanding of this necessarily until this show. And I'm like, oh, this is, that's an interesting thing to learn about there. And I had fun watching their little outcome of like, okay, so see, they came out changed, because like they came out changed in two ways. One, they're closer together, because as far as I can remember, I think they weren't very close. They just both really cared about the two of them just both really cared about Ryan's mom, and they had to share in the grief of her death in the first episode, and then over the course of the adventures they grew closer together. And watching that happen was kind of nice, to the point where it's almost easy to forget they weren't necessarily close at the beginning of this. And it's like realizing that that's the difference, is realizing that they've come that far and that they're there together with the bike and everything, is like kind of like a development, like a victory, where you're like that, like you feel like something really good happened in the show, and that's like a nice outcome. But also, so they came out changed in that they're a better family now, which is one of the best outcomes that companions have ever had in the show. But also they come out changed in that the they can't ignore the problems in the world now. They've become proactive people that look at larger problems than just themselves and work to try to solve those problems. And there's an analog to be made here. In this case, it's that they're like space police, like they're or like supernatural police. Like they hear about a thing in the news and the rumors and the tabloids, like what's up with that, and then they go slink off to like use their psychic paper to go into maybe government facilities and try and figure out how to solve the problem. Like they're very still trapped in sci-fi land, and they're gonna do sci-fi style solutions to sci-fi style problems. But there's the analog here of like people in real life like going through experiences that change them and make them more aware of the wider problems of society, and more directly engaged with wanting to grapple with those problems and push with those, be it like humanitarian aid or global warming and larger struggles like that. And so that's kind of what happens. Is like they not only grew as a family, but they grew as people individually, and how they view the world. And like that was really cool. That was actually a really cool final note for not only the characters, but like the season and the show and all that, because that's definitely the goal. Like they did an episode about ocean plastics, and they did an episode and about how like and also like the fact that like we have like impurities in our body that are in every human on the planet, basically, that we all have because of the kinds of things that are being dumped into the ocean and the environment. Like I think it was like Teflon and stuff like that, and like things like that. Like there's the stuff that it was like Stephanie was like, see, I was telling you about this, because she was just watching a documentary about the stuff, and then I showed her an episode of Doctor Who that was like about the exact same idea. But like our planet and our bodies are like being affected by forces that, I mean, in some cases people aren't even fully aware of, and they did a whole episode just about that idea. And it's like so like coming out changed, and then caring about the wider ramifications was clearly like a goal here. And while that episode was really kind of awkward and not amazing, and I'll probably not be revisiting it necessarily, watching these characters grow in this specific way actually makes a lot of sense. And it actually, I guess, it's kind of like the thesis of like what they want from their audience, if they want anything, because obviously this show is just a melange of different writers and creators, and it can be incoherent at times. But if there's any kind of like consistent message of what Doctor Who even wants, it might exactly be what Ryan and Graham kind of represent at the end of the show. So I think that's kind of neat. That stuff's interesting. And I don't know. I guess I should just stop here. I think I've explored the thoughts that I wanted to explore and rambled, and took twice as long as I should have. But that's just my brand, yo. That's what this is. I'll see you guys next time when I feel like going on about something, I guess. I don't know. I was literally talking to myself a bit. I was like, I should just fucking record something. No one complains about more podcasts. It's a weird thing to do, because they can just not watch them or listen to them or whatever. See ya.